Spaced practice is the exact opposite of cramming or binge learning. When you cram, you study for one long session just before an exam. With spaced learning, you take the same amount of study time, but you spread it out over a much longer period. If you do it this way, the same amount of study time produces much longer-lasting learning. Spaced practice is one of the most studied areas in the entire history of experimental research on learning. In 2009, a researcher named Nate Cornell split students into two groups. The first group studied the same material 8 times across a single day. The second group studied the same material 8 times across 4 days. Each were assessed a few days after their studying was completed. The second group remembered almost 40% more of the material than the first, even though they'd spent the same amount of time studying. There are a lot of reasons why spaced practice works so effectively. Every time you restudy material, you make the pathway to that material stronger. You also relearn it in a slightly different way to the first time you studied it. This means that not only do you strengthen the pathways to stored information, but you create more pathways. So, how do we make use of spaced practice? One way is to leave a day or two before revisiting any information you've recently learned. After a couple of days, return to the information to review it. Then, repeat this process 4 or 5 days later. Keep reviewing the information, but at increasingly larger intervals of time. This enhances learning and leads to better long-term retention. The time spent between reviews should be as long as necessary for recalling the information to be difficult, but it shouldn't be impossible. Trying to remember something after a month gap is probably not the best way forward, unless your memory is very good and you've built up to this time period. Make sure the time you wait is not so long that you simply forget the information entirely. Spaced practice works well with other learning techniques. For example, by using retrieval practice rather than simply rereading information during your spaced practice sessions, you will master material you never thought you could learn.